Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 26th edition of the Educational Leadership Forum panel discussion series focused on transforming education for human and planetary flourishing. Thank you for investing your time with us today. We deeply appreciate your presence and participation. My name is Aryan Salman, and I'm the moderator for this panel discussion. We all know teaching isn't just a job, it's a calling for most of us. But lately, that calling has been taking a toll. From increased workloads to post-pandemic pressures, our educators and education leaders are facing challenges like never before. Today, we are diving deep into this crucial issue and asking the critical question, how can we enable the mental well-being of educators? This discussion is in the backdrop of recent studies that paint a very stark picture. Globally, many educators are reporting high stress levels and burnout, while many also feel undervalued and overwhelmed. And let's be real, when our teachers are struggling, it affects everyone in the classroom. Even in countries like the UK, which is considered one of the top countries for education by many, nearly 8 out of 10 teachers are reporting high stress levels. I wonder if pilots have robust well-being standards and support. Why not teachers? Think about it. We trust pilots with hundreds of lives on every flight. We put safeguards. We make sure that we have enough support in place for them to do their job effectively. You have activities such as regular psychological evaluations, mandatory reporting, confidential support programs, mental health awareness training, peer support programs, culture of openness, creating fatigue management protocols, as well as having work-life balance initiatives. Now, consider our teachers. They're shaping both current and future generations day in and day out. They're navigating through complex issues, managing diverse learning needs, and often acting as frontline support for our young people. Yet, when it comes to their own mental well-being, the support systems being offered are pale in comparison. While we are not here to draw a comparison between, say, flying planes and shaping generations of young people, I do feel that we should be taking teacher mental well-being and mental health quite seriously, as much as we take care of pilots, if not more. To help us unpack how we can enable mental well-being of educators, we have an outstanding panel here with us today. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Gloria Marce, who is a registered educational psychologist in South Africa. She is a member of the International Research Network studying social and emotional learning skills and a research fellow at the University of the Free State. She has developed the Hope for Sustainable Livelihood program to assist people enter the world of work. I'm also delighted to welcome Ms. Pooja Singh, the co-founder of Shamtale Foundation in India, which works to build a caring, compassionate, and resilient society. She is a passionate advocate for mental health and well-being and has dedicated her career to strengthening social, emotional, and ethical learning in primary students and teachers. It's also my pleasure to welcome Radha Ruparan. Radha hosts monthly People First talk series with prominent leaders. She's the author of Brave Now, co-editor of What Leadership We Need Now, and speaks and writes on topics of leadership and well-being. Now, for those of you who are new to the Educational Leadership Forum, the forum is a gathering of leading educational leaders, experts, practitioners from across top educational institutions and organizations dedicated to shaping the many futures of education. Each edition of the Educational Leadership Forum focuses on a critical theme and features a stimulating panel discussion, an inspiring lecture, a distinguished global lecture, as well as workshops from educational leaders, in addition to the global networking opportunities. Without further ado, let's begin the 26th panel discussion on enabling mental well-being of educators by yielding the floor to Dr. Gloria Marce for her initial remarks.
Good afternoon to everybody, or good morning, whatever the case may be. I do hope that you gain some great knowledge and interesting thoughts from our conversation today. So I'm going to give you an idea about our South African context. Aran, I'm wondering how long you would like me to go forward? Just
5 minutes, Gloria.
Thank you. So I've been an educator for many years in the South African context, and then I've become an educational psychologist, trying to understand a little bit more about both learners and the profession of teaching. So to introduce you to the South African context, I'm sure that you are well aware of where we are situated globally and how our history has been shaken by many adversities in the past. So one of the things that did happen to our country historically is that we were colonized many years ago, and many different variety of people, diverse cultures from Europe entered the South African arena, the area of land, as well as different tribes from the north of Africa coming down into the southern tip of Africa. So we have a tremendous diversity of culture, tradition, languages. So in our country, we have 11 official languages, and a 12th is added by sign language for those people who are hard of hearing. So that gives you an idea of the number of languages that there are and the diversity of culture. So one of the things that our educators face is that huge diverseness of culture and language, and teaching young children how to read in a language that is not often their mother tongue is difficult. So that's one of the difficulties that we've experienced. The other difficulty has been health issues. So some years back in the early part of this century, we were very hard hit by the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and many of our young people were left orphaned. So our educators have had to become primary caregivers to many of the students and children that they have in their classroom situation, which is not always easy, because we do have three major issues that have been identified by our education department: poverty, inequality, and unemployment. So these three issues contribute very much to the fact that we don't have a lot of resources in our education system. And so very often educators have to look after and teach sometimes 100 children in their class. Sometimes these 100 children are gathered perhaps under a tree, and our weather conditions are quite harsh. So when it's hot, it's very hot. When it's cold, it's very cold, especially in the high-veld regions of our country. So this gives you an idea of the difficulties that our educators in the South African context face.
Thank you, Gloria. Really appreciate your comments on it and giving us a backdrop. Now I yield the floor to Pooja for her initial remarks.
Thank you, Aryan. Thank you, Gloria, for that brief introduction about South Africa. I think I could relate to almost everything when it comes to India context. And I would not repeat, but just to share with the audience that India is also a very diverse country. We work directly with public schools, the government schools here, and the conditions of government school, as Gloria was describing, is from weather to resources to teachers traveling very, very far from their home because they get posted in that geography is very, very similar. So in Shamtale, we started with this vision, understanding that creating a caring and compassionate environment for our students was very, very essential. And in order to create that safety and environment of nurturance, we brought social emotional ethical learning to classrooms, and we were working with group of young people where they were engaging into classrooms. But this idea really struck us that if those fellows who are like who we provide resource from outside and not a part of government system, if they drop out from school of, or if the project stops, what happens to these children? And children would get a different environment from different setups. The community would behave very, very differently, the fellows would behave differently, and the government school teachers would behave differently. So it was very, very crucial for us to understand that it is the teachers who are going to stay with student no matter what, because teachers are in here in service for 30 years, 30 to 50 years, and then it's a very crucial area we need to work on. And we realized that in order to bring a sustainability in the classroom, it is essential to work with teachers, because we always have this question that who give care to caregivers, because without that caregiving, I don't think so the vision that we have, the goal that we have, we will be able to achieve. I will be sharing more about what other work that we have done with educators, but very happy to be here. Thank you, Aryan, for inviting here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pooja. Now I yield the floor to Radha Ruparaya.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. And Gloria and Pooja, there's just so much that resonated from what you shared. So I had a global leadership accelerator at Teach for All. And Teach for All were a global network of locally led independent organizations in 60 countries around the world, including South Africa, including India. And we have 13,000 teachers in classrooms currently in some of the most underserved areas, and 100,000 alumni leaders. So these are teachers, school leaders, and others who are committed to ensuring that all children fulfill their potential. And so I think similar to Gloria and Pooja, I just see such a diversity of needs and contexts, and thinking about well-being in that context. So let me just share a few lessons we've learned over the last few years around teacher well-being in this global space. The first is, Aryan, it's very similar to what you shared, which is this idea that we have to start thinking about teacher well-being, not as a nice to have, but as a must have, right? That is important because teachers are one of our biggest resources. So just for that, the means in itself. Second, the latest UNESCO report show that we're going to have a teacher shortage of 44 million teachers globally if we want to achieve our goals. And we know the young generation who are looking for jobs prioritize well-being. And finally, there is a link between teacher well-being and student outcomes, not just academic outcomes, but also non-academic outcomes. So if a teacher is more satisfied and well, there are studies that show that the students in the classroom don't just perform well academically, but they also build strong relationships with one another, can collaborate better with one another, right? So for all these reasons, we have to start elevating this conversation. And I think it has changed. There's been a bit of destigmatization, particularly these last few years with the pandemic. But we still have to continue to elevate this conversation and say it is must have. The second thing we've learned is the importance of every single teacher having a support network, right? All the studies show that even one or two teachers within a school who are supportive of another teacher can impact that teacher's well-being and effectiveness. And I think we can go bigger than that. So for example, our partner in New Zealand, Akomata Tupu, or Teach First New Zealand, they have built a holistic support network around teachers. So that includes a teacher coach who can coach them academically, but also provide pastoral and well-being care. It includes access to psychological support. So Gloria, I really appreciate the work that you're doing, because we're often working in context like Ukraine, where there's wars, or places where there's intergenerational trauma, and we do need access to professional support. And then the third thing is that peer-to-peer support. So all of our teachers have access to other peer teachers. And actually, the biggest thing that I hear whenever I'm in those spaces is, wow, I realize I'm not alone, and sometimes just the space to have your feelings validated. It was a stressful day. I'm tired, I'm exhausted. That alone can alleviate a lot of pressure. So I think the second lesson is around support networks. Let me just share two others quickly. A third big lesson we've learned is that the systemic challenges are real, right? These classrooms of 100 students, the lack of pay and resources, sometimes kids are going hungry, the administrative burden on teachers, that's going to persist. We have to start tackling these systemic challenges. I completely believe we need collective leadership across the system to do that. And in the meantime, we need to be resourcing our teachers with the skills to cope in these increasingly uncertain environments. And so across our network, we're doing a lot of work, in different countries to grow skills like mindfulness, resilience, navigating emotions, understanding trauma. And we talk about socio-emotional learning for children. What we're seeing, so for example, in our program in Mexico, they are doing very similar work with their teachers as they are doing with students, because we recognize that this is linked. And let me just share one final thought, because oftentimes when we think about teacher well-being, we think about balance or reducing workload or reducing the number of hours. And I think all of that stuff is critical. But probably like Pooja and Gloria, I have just seen the most incredibly passionate teachers who, despite challenging contexts, can rise above challenges. And one of the factors we've seen that enables that is when teachers are connected to purpose and reconnecting to purpose, on a daily and a weekly basis, right? Because it's when you recognize what you're up to and you can remind yourself of that daily or weekly, that you remember that it's all worth it. And some of the ways we've seen that happen is in Armenia, our program there, they have a weekly journaling practice that teachers do to reconnect to purpose. And they have mentors and coaches that help them reframe daily challenges in the context of something bigger. I think another very small thing that we can do, and I'll just end on this note, is we oftentimes focus on what's not working. I'm a huge believer in looking at the assets in the system. And so I think even taking small moments to celebrate teachers and school administrators and leaders for what is working is powerful. I was just speaking to an educational leader in Cambodia earlier this week, and he had a conversation with a school leader in one of the most challenging environments. And he sat there for an hour and they just shared stories of the students that had made progress. And that school leader left so energized. And so I think these micro moments where we can listen to both the hardship, but also acknowledge the progress and remind ourselves why we're in this challenging work, I think all of that stuff is extremely important. So I will just pause there.
Thank you so much, Radha, for sharing your insights as well as your learnings. I think this is a very rich way of looking at what Teach for All is doing and how we can learn from that. Given that the challenges that we have, like from the discussions, from your initial remarks, I do see that a lot of stress coming from lack of skills, or even from what do you call too much pressure in terms of utilizing certain skills, health issues, climate-related mental well-being challenges, as well as resource-related challenges that you have. Given all these challenges that we have, what do you think are some of the critical challenges to, say, mainstreaming both the discussion on mental well-being of educators as well as putting safeguards to protect them on the job? So what do you think are some of the major challenges that you think we're facing in our systems and contexts? So I think one of you can take it forward. As I don't want to put you on the spot.
Okay, I'll go forward with that. I think that the most important thing, and I want to reiterate what Raja said, is that teachers themselves need a support system. So the personal is the professional. We can't really divide the profession of teaching from the person of the teacher. Because in my view, they're inexorably intertwined. So we do need to have programs that are contextually and culturally relevant for our educators. So in our diverse cultural situation in South Africa, we've had a couple of different approaches. I've personally been involved in 4 different approaches, and I'll share those with you. So a lot of our schools are faith-based schools. The majority of our population is Christian, but that doesn't mean that we don't have other faiths represented in our education system. So we've got the Jewish Board of Education, we've got the Catholic Institute of Education, we've got the Anglican Institute of Education, and so on and so forth. So a lot of our schools have got faith-based foundations, and these are schools that are able to develop what we call here a pastoral care community. So looking after not only the educators as part of that care system, but the broader community as well. So, for example, one of the things that I've been involved in doing is going around the country educating teachers in just basic counseling skills and how to have a conversation with on one-on-one or with groups of students who are having difficulties. We've put in place feeding schemes for those children who are hungry when they come to school because there's a lack of resources at home. And so the community comes together, and very often the schools, as part of the school curriculum, grow their own vegetables, and the grannies or the people who are unemployed in the community come into the school and cook a sustainable meal for both the children and the staff. In some of our schools, this is what happens. Our social emotional project that we started in 2018, which was part of the International Research Network, have looked at the teachers' perceptions of social and emotional learning skills. And just to give you an idea, the result of that first collection of data from our educators showed us that the most important ingredient, if that's the right word, for our educators and teachers to have a good learning environment is interpersonal relationships. So they prioritize as an absolute essential is learning about each other and being able to communicate and have good interpersonal relationships with each other as peers. So teacher to teacher, teacher to child, child to child, as well as interpersonal relationships between families and the broader community. So I think like India, we have a collectivist culture predominantly in South Africa, although there are pockets of individualist cultures. Part of this program also has been to introduce a way of connecting with people using a program that was developed in Canada by Kate Weingarten. And this is she entitles her program Witnessing the Witness, which is very much related to helping an educator to I can't think of the word, to helping an educator to just set aside the difficulties of the day. So without having to unpack what it was that they experienced, to just be there to witness what it is that they experienced. Sorry, not what it is that they experienced, but what they were left with, the feelings that they were left with from the experience that they've had during the day. And I use the way of working that Kate Weingarten has developed and researched, and that seems to really work very well in our South African context. And then we've got a wonderful organization in this country called SADAG, SADAG, and that stands for the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. So during COVID, which was a difficult time for us all, we decided as part of as a consultant to SADAG, I put in place a teacher support group, and we met every week for a period of about 3 months. And this program really was beneficial to a lot of educators, some of whom are still in contact with me today, just to be part of that support network. So when we had lockdown, we communicated in the support group online. So it was an online support group run by the SADAG organization. And then there's another organization in this country that is doing amazing work. And they are, the title of their organization is Partnerships for Possibilities. And how they work is that a very strong, well-resourced school partners with a less well-resourced school, those schools who are particularly under-resourced. So they create a partnership whereby they help each other. So those are the interventions that we've tried to put into place in the South African context. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Appreciate your take on the interventions that you had. I have a question for Pooja. Pooja, you've been working in the education space and you're supporting public schools. What do you think are some of the changes that are required both at the school level as well as at the systemic level for us to have better support for educators in the space of mental well-being?
Thank you so much for this question. I think all of you might be aware of new education policy 2020 that India has released recently. And if you go through the policy, it clearly emphasizes the importance of student well-being. But as Aryan was asking, what stops this from happening is like when it comes to educators, it feels like it is not important. We have partnered with state, and we were developing this what we call state curriculum framework, just like how we have national curriculum framework, we have state curriculum framework. And there are four categories for developing this state curriculum framework. One is teacher education, one is early education, the other one is school education, and then there is this adult education. And I was part of teacher education state curriculum framework, and we all know that there are two categories in which teachers get developed. It's pre-service and in-service. If you pull out the course and if you see, apart from child psychology, there is nothing related to well-being. There are 33 hours of training, which is like from the state assigned to teachers. And even if you make this loud and clear at a state level, at a policy level, that the NEP demands student well-being, it doesn't become very, very visible to the state that it has to happen through teacher well-being. There is this assumption that teachers come with some powerful skill. They will pick the book and they will implement this because they know it, and it becomes so difficult for them to explain that well-being is something that needs to be felt, that needs to be experienced. Without making teachers experience how well-being looks like for them, it is highly impossible that teachers would be able to facilitate social emotional learning skills in classroom. So I think my biggest challenge working with state is making them realize that in order to uh, make social emotional learning part of student classroom and overall state curriculum, it's very essential for integrating it into state. So if you look at teacher training, if you look at the entire online and offline system that we have for teacher training, you will find nothing related to teacher well-being. So what efforts we have tried to make through state curriculum framework is like we have pushed that in service training and in pre-service training there should be few modules just dedicated for well-being. So we partnered with state, and then there are districts. So each states have district, and at a state level, what happens? The training goes in cascading model. So they partner with district. The district is responsible for training the teacher at block level, because that's the unit in India. So we trained 33 district, who's called as the trainer of trainers. So they are the educators. They are responsible for training the educators. And what we did was we developed a audio series program, where we understood that integrating a full-time program in the busy schedule for teachers would be impossible. So what we did was we introduced a 15-minute audio practice which had one worksheet associated with, and it was based mostly on skills of awareness and attention, emotion regulation, and relationship skills, self and community. And what we did was we made them experience the entire 21-day audio. Why it was 21 days? Because we all know that something you do for 21 days, it converts into habit. And they found this curriculum, this intervention really, really useful. I remember one of the teachers sharing that, this is for the first time in my training career, and it's very, very emotional that someone is really thinking about me. Someone is just saying that this time is for you. You don't have to think how you're going to implement this in your classroom. It's for us, it's for me. And that was really, really emotional, because that means that in the system there is nothing for teachers which teachers can say this is for just for me. So that's one thing. And at school level, I feel that apart from the lack of resources, which is like a very systemic, like it requires systemic intervention, which I don't know how much we as the someone working in NGOs have control. But I think what Gloria and Radha was mentioning, that creating that peer group, that support network, whether it is the community, the relationship of community with teachers, whether it is other teacher who's working in the similar school, how do you create such space in school where there are conversation that I feel just like you, whether it could be through staff meetings, it could be through one-on-ones, and I think that structure of staff meeting can go through the state, that this could be one of the agenda, just to get to know each other, or something like fun Saturdays that we do in our organization, starting a day with a settling practice. And I think all those culture building at school level might change things at school level, on ground. Yeah, thank you.
So much, Pooja, for sharing that. Radha, my question to you is on similar lines. However, since your organization is in multiple countries, I would ask a question around benchmarking. So, if you see all the countries, what are some of the common safeguards that you think everybody needs, given the experience that you folks have on the ground in supporting educators? So, if there are any three major, what do you call, interventions that every school should have, irrespective of whether they are high income school or a low income school. So what would they be, Radha, from your point of view?
Yeah, well, actually, let me just share the biggest thing that we've learned as being part of a global network. And it's similar to, I think, a little bit of what Gloria was saying earlier, is you have to have contextual solutions. But what we have found, and one of our core values, is locally rooted, globally informed, right? And so that means that we need to have solutions that resonate with a specific context in the language, recognizing some schools have 20 students in a classroom and others have 200, right? So it's got to be locally rooted. But what I mean by globally informed is that we have also learned that when we start sharing across borders, so much innovation is possible, and also that sense of community. So let me give you one area where we've done that. So a few years ago, and this is actually one really big challenge that I think we need to address, is this idea of trauma. And there is trauma happening all the time at a local level, whether that is bullying, whether that is a child is not being fed, whether that is violence at home. And increasingly, there's trauma that we're seeing at a more global level, whether that is the impact of climate, many of these regional wars or wars that are crossing borders, the refugees moving from one place to another. My niece, who's in the UK, she has kids who are coming from the Ukraine. And so children are really learning about all of this firsthand. And so in that area, what we recognize is how you deal with that is going to look different. But we, a couple of years ago, hosted a 5-month fellowship. We designed it from scratch, a trauma and well-being practitioner fellowship, bringing together 60 people from 22 different countries around the world, from India to South Africa to Nigeria to Mexico. And we actually shared many of the principles that we've talked about today, right? So just as an example, one of the biggest learnings from the field of trauma-informed teaching is that one single loving relationship can be the single biggest protective force against trauma, right? And so when a teacher understands that I am in a classroom with 100 children, but that student who has their head on the desk, maybe there's something going on for them, and maybe I can be the one. And similarly, like Pooja was saying, we need to ensure that teachers have that single loving relationship, or hopefully more than that, for themselves, right? So that is a universal sort of principle. And we did a lot of, we brought Georgetown University, we brought the science of it, we brought indigenous wisdom into it. But then we saw how that is contextualized was quite different. So in India, our friends who were part of the fellowship from there, they used Bollywood movies to destigmatize these ideas of trauma and violence. In South Africa, our teachers and team there started to use mindfulness practices of deep breathing to slow down the nervous system. In the Ukraine, where they were dealing with, ongoing bombings on a day-to-day basis, there the focus was on psychological first aid. But what was incredibly powerful is each of these people then began sharing what they were doing, and they recognized that they're not alone. And over time, we want to continue sharing solutions, because the problems are contextualized, but many of the solutions are shareable.
Am I audible? Okay. Thank you so much for your insights, Radha. That was quite insightful. My next question is to either of you. Uh, Given that, like, you're working in the formal education sector, if there are like three key ideas that we can draw from say other fields into the education space, so what would they be? So maybe we start with Gloria, since you are working with a lot of folks, so if you can share with us your insights, that'd be lovely.
So I think that perhaps a key word that comes to my mind when you ask this question is that of hope. It's one of the constructs that we've been trying to work well with in the South African context. So hope is fundamental. If we have hope, even though, and I use those words very specifically, even though we have experienced trauma, we can have hope for the future. And a lot of the work that we've been doing surrounds this construct of hope. So hope, as I understand it, has four basic constructs: that of social support, so that social support of one-on-one, one to a community, one to a society as a whole, and that recognition of I am because you are. So hope and social emotional learning skills, when we compare that to Ubuntu, it really is the same, structured in a very similar way, using different language to talk about the same concepts. The second construct of hope is that of competencies or skills that I have that I can share with you to help us to work together. And then that the construct of coping with adversity. So we've got so much adversity that we need to cope with, and to work towards skills to cope with that adversity. And then we have a spiritual foundation. So and that really doesn't have anything to do with religion as such, but some kind of spirituality that we are part of as educators, a whole. And I think you so very well alluded to that at the beginning of this conversation, that, we as educators are dealing with forming children, and children as citizens for the future.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Radha, would you like to add on?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked across many different fields. And yesterday I was just watching a panel around artificial intelligence and how that might affect elections. And someone was asked the question, well, what's the answer? And they basically said, no one person can solve this on their own. If we wait for tech companies to do it, they might not have the right incentives. If we wait for the election commission, they don't have the right resources. And so what the speaker had said that I thought was so profound is all of us have to watch out for, if our neighbors are getting misinformation, we have to call it out. If we are educators, we have to look at that in schools, right? So the big lesson there is this idea, if we are trying to solve these big systemic challenges, right, around how do we care for our students and our teachers in a world where mental health and well-being has not been prioritized. For these systemic challenges, it's something that we believe in our network, we need collective leadership. And so that means, to really change systems, like Pooja was saying, if you have governments, but they've got policies, but they're not actually recognizing that the teachers are not equipped, we really need leadership at all levels of the system. And in our network, that's what we're up to. You know, we want people who've had proximity to the challenges, but then we want to grow their leadership capacities to say, no matter what challenging situation I'm in, I can tackle it. And then what we need to be doing is bringing together leaders from across the system. So we need to be bringing together that local government official with the teacher, with the student, with the parents, because they're responsible for that, with the administrators. And that is hard work. And, you know, but I've seen pockets where that's happening, where people are coming together from across the system and saying we want to solve things. And I have seen change happen. So I think that's my biggest sort of learning and belief, that we need collective leadership to change systems.
Thank you so much, Radha. Am I audible? Yeah. So thank you so much, Radha. Pooja, if you can have a take on it.
Thank you, Aryan, for asking this question. I think I have very limited scope of working with other sector, but what I can say from my experience is that, you know, when a teacher gets into a government job, it's like a permanent thing. So there is this retirement that happens at XYZ age. Um, and I think in the structure, what we do as leaders is like constantly review, constantly, you know, do personal reflections, constantly engage to, as Radha was saying, that there is this form of leadership, whether it's through fellowships, whether it's through, you know, some capacity building, that the professional growth mapping that your organization does for you. Clearly system lacks that, because there is this mindset that, you know, this is a permanent government job where you enter at certain age and you leave at xyz age. So there is no strategic method when it comes to teachers professional personal growth, teachers appraisal system, review mechanism that we generally, I'm not saying whether you should push out someone on that those parameters, but at least there should be an accountability, which currently the government system lacks. There is no dialogue, there is no one to think about teachers. And if we don't solve that problem, we don't see teachers as leaders, we don't see teachers role as constant developing, then I think the problem that we are facing in education system is going to remain as it is. So yeah, these are my thoughts on what we can take or adopt from other places.
Thank you so much, Pooja, for sharing that. That just gives me thoughts around the idea that, like, when we look at educational institutions, there's a lot of focus on standardization, and I think that also causes a lot of stress. Like, I was just reading a report on what's happening with inspections and testing and how it affects mental well-being of teachers. We all say children cannot learn if they are not able to feel safe, if they're not able to feel in a comfortable zone. Similarly, I think teachers cannot foster that kind of an environment if they themselves don't feel safe. So perhaps the question then is how can we, would you call, propel our policymakers to look at creating avenues which are not just for supervision, not just looking at figuring out if somebody is not doing well, but also creating these supportive supervision mechanisms where the focus is more on support, which I believe your organizations and you in your individual capacities are doing amazing work. So moving on to the next phase of this discussion, each one of you get to ask one question to another. This is a round robin uh, round. So that's going to be quite interesting. So you each one have one question that you can ask to another person. So let's start with Pooja.
I would be so I have to ask someone one question that I really okay. So I want to ask Radha. Radha, what do you think that you've worked in so many, like you've worked with so many countries? What do you think are few common thing that stops us from thinking about teacher well-being? And what are few things like going forward if we focus on? It would be easy to you know cater to, especially organization like us who are working directly with state, what are few things that you would suggest that we should practice so that teacher well-being becomes very, very, not very easy, but at least possible?
Yeah, I will say one thing, and it's not easy and it's going to take persistence. But I think one of the reasons teacher well-being is not prioritized is because we've lost our sense of what's the purpose of education anyways. So when you were talking, Aryan, about standardized tests and, you know, focusing on specific metrics, we've lost sight of what we're up to. And so what we found across our network is when we go back to the roots of it and we start saying, what is the purpose of education? And then you start bringing people together about that conversation. That is such a beautiful entry point. And so across our network, you know, we believe that the purpose of education is around growing students as leaders who can create a better future for themselves and for all of us, right? And then when you say, well, if we want to grow that capacity in students, how are we going to do that if we don't develop that in teachers? Now, it's not easy, right? Because we've been ingrained a certain way. You know, in some senses, that requires unlearning. But at the same time, everybody's been in a classroom. Everybody, you know, many people are parents and they have a child in the classroom. And so I think when you can stop and get back to that core, you know, what do you want for your kids? What do you wish you had? That becomes an entry point to a conversation. So that's what I would say. I think if there was one place I would start, I'd say, let's go back to the bigger picture. And I think the second thing I would just say is I have seen so much progress when you've got incredible leaders who against all odds are willing to stand for things. And so if there's any teachers in the room thinking, gosh, I can't do it, I have seen people who, because they were convicted, because they believed in it, they kept at it. So it's not easy, but have the conversation. And if you can't have it in another way, and if you can't, find one or two more people who will support you, and then try something small and then share those learnings. So I would just say a sense of possibility is the other thing that we've seen across our network. One or two people can start to make a real difference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Pooja, for your question, and thank you, Radha, for your response. Radha, now you can ask a question to either of the two.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask the question to Gloria then, to bring you into the conversation. You know, when we're thinking about classrooms with 100 teachers, and we're thinking about low resource environments where you might not be able to get someone who's a trained psychologist, do you have any advice for teachers or those who are supporting teachers? You know, what would be one or two very practical things that you would support teachers in being able to do to support students? Because if they can do that with students, then hopefully they can get that support themselves.
Well, that's quite a question. And I know that I've only got a short while to answer that, because I think we could debate that for a long time. But I think essentially what you were talking about just now, that sense of purpose, the sense of passion, and looking at systemic interventions. So starting in a place with small steps and moving forward incrementally, so that each teacher has that sense that they are supported by good leadership, supported by the community, because very often teachers are not, you know, they don't have a good status in our country. So to make them aware of the fact that they are individuals that have value, to equip them with a sense of self-worth and personal agency. So if we can do that for our teachers in a multi-tiered and multifaceted intervention, then they would be able to roll that over into the classroom situation. I'm very aware of the fact that we are interconnected as human beings, and we need to support each other. I'm wondering if that is answering the question that you're asking.
No, I think that's right, because I think what you bring to life is this idea that there are solutions that can happen at the individual level. So to support teachers and grow their agency. And ultimately, we also have to change things at the systemic level. So I love that you brought that into the conversation. Yeah.
Yes, because I think that any kind of system there needs to be dialogue around the needs of each individual situation. We can't have just authority dictating what is needed, because we need to have that multifaceted dialogue to understand the needs of people within context.
Thank you. Thank you, Radha, for your question, and Gloria for your response. Gloria, you have one question that you can direct at either of them.
Oh, so I'm not sure who would like to answer this, but the question that forward in my mind at the moment is, how could we invite people? I think our audience at the moment are by and large educators, teachers of some sort or other, or in the system. But I'm wondering how we as a fraternity can invite people to join the profession of teaching, because yes, we are going to be short of teachers. How do we get people interested in sharing?
If you can direct it at one of them.
Okay, Raja.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. We are literally having this conversation in our network right now because we're thinking about how do we recruit the young generation. So a couple of things. One is we are seeing that the young generation from focus group really does care about purpose and meaningful careers. And so I think if we can, again, reground teaching in that, it is one of the most important professions, and yet somehow in society we've lost that. We've lost that value and respect for teachers. So I think it's how do we help people see what's possible? In our network, we have young people who come teach for 2 years. Many of them think they're going to stay for 2 years. About 80% stay for a lifetime working in education or related work, right? So when you get proximate to the challenges, you recognize you can make a difference. I think the second thing we're thinking about is, from a systemic level, how do we change the dialogue at the university level? So so often in universities, people are channeled into careers where they're going to make a lot of money, whether it's consulting or banking here where I'm in the US. And so can we actually start having a conversation with universities and saying, can you come back to your purpose, which is challenging your best and brightest people into the careers that we need most, right? Whether that is teaching or other forms of social entrepreneurship. So I just think we have to have a dialogue around the meaning of work again, and have to have it. And we're beginning to start that conversation as well at a macro level. And I think all of us can play a part in it. So if you are making a career choice right now, pause and say, where am I going to spend the rest of my life, right? Can I take the choice that's going to be more meaningful and purposeful? If you're in a university, ask yourself, what are you trying to get people to do? If you are a teacher, how do you get others to recognize the value of the professions? I think all of us can play a role in this.
Thank you so much for that one, Radha. We have one question which I think the response to it is super easy. So contextual solutions require contextual contextual problems require contextual solutions. Educators are under more trauma than learners. How does traumatized educator help a traumatized learner? Gosh, that sounds rhetorical. So yeah, so the question, I think we would move on to the other one. If anybody wants to add to this, please feel.
I can give a 30-second answer to this one. So I think the reality is we should not have traumatized educators. And so the work that we're doing with students to address their trauma, we have to be doing it with teachers. And so just one example of that, we do a lot of work with educators and leaders of organization on simple things like, how do we calm our nervous system, when we're in activated zones? Or how do we get them access to support networks? So this idea of secondary or vicarious trauma that teachers are dealing with is real. So actually, I think it's a brilliant question. And the answer is we have to invest a lot more in first working with the trauma that our educators are feeling.
Thank you. Yes, Gloria.
I would like to add to that because in our experience here, it is those people who have experienced trauma that are able to assist those who have been traumatized far more easily because they develop that kind of empathy, which is so meaningful and so important in assisting other people who have been traumatized. So it's an asset.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for that one. I have a question for all of you. If there are three things, I am saying three because it's the easiest number, but if you have more or less, that's perfectly fine. What would be those three things that, as an individual educator who's not too much caring about the mental well-being aspect of their lives, what are the three things that they should be aware of or look in a particular direction? So can we have Pooja and then maybe Radha and Gloria can add?
Thank you for this question. I'm just thinking about the answer. I think in general, the educators should just be curious on assessing how they are generally feeling about their work. And that could be assessed through when they wake up, do they feel like going to school? Do they feel like teaching students? Do they feel like, checking their worksheets or giving feedback? So if they could just be curious on around how they are feeling in general, not thinking about their mental health or well-being, just being curious on the bodily sensations that they feel, that what are the mostly sensations that I'm feeling these days, and is it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? I think that would serve the purpose, Aryan. I think just being curious around your thoughts, your bodily sensation and emotion, if you're not going very, very deep around your well-being, generally just making that choice. And I think a lot of individuals that I work with, they are not aware of their own body, own mind, and their own emotions, which is like very dangerous, very, very dangerous.
Thank you, Pooja. Radha, would you like to add?
I think I'll just build on what Pooja said. So three things: know your why, like constantly connect to why am I here? And you can do that simply by connecting with a student who brings you joy, or a moment. So I say, take a moment every day and celebrate one small thing, one tiny win. That helps you connect with your why. 2, know yourself. And know yourself means knowing your strengths as well. What brings you energy? What brings you joy? Because that's what you're going to be able to bring to a classroom, and then get support to figure out where are your gaps and where are your fears, because that can also help you in the day-to-day work. And the third is don't do it alone. So just always reach out to people. This is a beautiful profession, and you're going to be much more resourced if you're doing it with others. So always reach out to others and share what's bringing you joy, but always reach out to others when you're struggling, because there is someone there who can help you.
Gloria? Yes, Gloria? Thank you, Radha.
So, when you asked the question, I wrote down on a piece of paper 3 things that I thought, and it's very interesting for me, and that's why I'm smiling so much, is that it's exactly the same as what the previous 2, Raja and Pooja, have just said, but I'll give them to you in my order, is social support. I think that teachers need to have a support mechanism of people around them, and they need to be able to identify who it is that they can go to when they are feeling unwell, uncomfortable, for support. The second thing is self-knowledge. So that links very much with what you've been saying, is I need to know what it is that I need. I need to know what is important for me. I need to know what gives me joy. I need to understand who I am so that I can help you to understand who you are. And then the third thing is skills, to always be developing skills, to learn one new skill at a time, constantly, to just engage in lifelong learning. It really would help us as educators to sustain ourselves and keep going.
Thank you, Gloria. Now let's come to the systems part of it, and then we'll take one last question. So, as systems, what are some of the things that we need to have as foundational elements to perhaps promote mental well-being of educators more meaningfully? So, I would request maybe Radha to take the question, and then Gloria, and then Pooja.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big question. So as systems, what do we need? I'm going to come back to the same answer that I've been sharing, which is we need so many different things to happen. We need policy change at the government level. We need innovation and courage at the classroom level when your curriculum might prohibit you from doing something, but you believe it's the right thing in doing it. So ultimately, I actually think what systems need is leadership. And we just need leadership at all levels. And to that point, if you are a teacher in this room, it's how are you growing your capacities? But same thing, if we're policy leaders, how are we shifting and growing our mindsets? Because I've seen that when we have leadership, when we invest in people, when we take a people first approach, that's when things shift. Ultimately, systems are built of people, and systems are just relationships of people. And so I think that's the core thing.
That was
Arian, I think you're on mute.
all right. Am I audible? Yes. Perfect. So thank you so much, Radha, for pointing out that leadership and people-first approach is the way forward to ensure, or maybe have a solid foundation around it. So, Gloria.
Sorry, I was muted. I agree 100% with you, Raja. It's about the interconnectedness of people and how we dialogue with each other that creates possibilities, future possibilities. So at a system level, I think we need to have multi-tiered. So from top to bottom, from bottom to top, and multifaceted interventions all the way through. So it's really about social interconnectedness that will help us to make teachers very influential in terms of developing themselves as well as developing our future citizens of the world.
Thank you,
Thank-
Gloria. I'll just briefly add to what I'll not repeat whatever both have said. I completely agree. I think conferences like these at the advocacy level, constant conferences, dialogues around how this has becoming a need is equally important. And I think at systemic level, what we could do is advocate more around its need, its requirement, and its impact that will have on both students and teachers. So the awareness is very, very crucial again for building such spaces.
Thank you so much for your insights, Pooja. We have one more question. This is a great question. What advice or encouragement would you give to educators who are struggling to maintain their well-being and are considering leaving the profession? So we go ahead with Radha and then Pooja and then Gloria.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. So one is you're not alone. You know, if you're struggling, this is a challenging profession, but it is one of the most noble professions as well. And so I have seen educators who stuck with it and over time built up their skill sets and built up their support networks, finding ways to navigate. And so I would just saying that don't leave without talking to someone. You know, find someone who you admire. Maybe there's a teacher or a school leader who's a few years ahead of you, who looks a bit more sorted. By the way, you'll find out they struggle too, right? They struggle too, but they may have built the capacity. So that's what I would say is just reach out to someone. And then the second thing I always believe is start small, 1%, right? You can just do micro things that can improve your well-being. You know, sometimes it is taking a few deep breaths. Sometimes it is sitting down and actually eating a meal and not doing it at your desk. Sometimes it is going for a walk. Sometimes it is finding someone to talk to. And so I think if you can start, you know, sometimes we're so overwhelmed, we say, I don't even have time to focus on my well-being. I have found that these tiny resources, and they're just all around us. So when you start asking yourself, just ask yourself the question, what resources do I have? It may be a friend, it may be a small technique, it may be movement, it may be dance, it may be music, it may be a student who brings you joy. Find those resources and connect with them as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Radha.
I'll just add to what Radha said that teaching is one of the most happiest form of joy in being in classroom. It's just that you don't see it on an everyday basis and you don't recognize it on an everyday basis, and that's why it might seem fatiguing. Forget everything, just talk to your students, just listen to your students what they have to say about you. The moment you feel that you want to leave this job, just go to one of your students and talk about you and your life. And I think there will be this motivation to stay, because as Radha was saying, that this is the profession, because all of us, if we recall our childhood, there is this one teacher who made a difference. And imagine teaching 30 children and then you become the same person. And we all know that kindness and compassion makes us feel good, makes us feel warm hearted. And I think you need to just need that moment, moment of pause, the moment you thought that, today I'm going to resign and drop this. Just go to one of your students and talk. And I think you would change your decision. Thank you.
I just want to say I love that, Pooja. Yeah, I love that.
Gloria.
So I agree with all that you've said. I really do, because I think that teaching is the one profession where we can make a difference. So if teachers just reflect on just one small good thing that happened each day, just one, as you say, Roger, that just start with something small and see how all of those small things fit together, because you are greater than the sum of the parts. You are the whole. And if we look at when one throws a stone into a pond, it creates a ripple. And the work that educators do creates a ripple throughout humanity. And I think it's the most important job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria, Pooja, and Radha. We'll just have one final take from each one of you. If there's one message that you want to give to education leaders, what would that be in 30 seconds to 60 seconds? I think we'll start with Gloria, then go to Pooja and Radha.
Oh, wow. How do I summarize all of this in a word? I just think that education is a lifelong process, and an educator creates the oil for that mechanism to keep going lifelong, and the educator needs to use the oil actually for themselves too.
Gloria.
Thank you.
Pooja.
Yeah, I would just say that just think, why are you here? As Radha kept on saying, why are you here? There will be time in a challenging situation where you think that this job is worthless, I am worthless, no meaning to it. But just, if you're watching me, if you're seeing me, just remember this space. And I want to say that you all are doing amazing job where you're contributing to many, many lives. Please continue doing that. On a day-to-day basis, it might not feel important, but you are doing an important job, and the most kindest work that you can do on this planet. So thank you for doing that, and please continue doing that.
Thank you so much, Pooja, Radha.
Well, I'll end with a macro thought and a micro thought. So the macro thought is this, when I think about everything that is happening in the world, the good and the challenging, the climate crisis, or how technology is changing, which could have good or bad, I think all of this rests on the next generation, next generation of students. And so I think supporting, developing that resource is the greatest contribution to society. So that's my macro point. And my micro point is just echoing what Gloria and Pooja said. The day-to-day you might not remember, literally take one moment at the end of every day or in the morning, tie it to a habit. Maybe it's if you're having a cup of tea, or the minute you're walking to your classroom, like find a specific moment, or in the shower, wherever that is for you that you'll remember, and just take one moment and just celebrate one thing in the day about yourself and about someone else, a student or another teacher. And what I think that will give you is the reminder of what you're up to. And it will also help you discover the strength that you can use to do this really important work.
Thank you for sharing that, Radha. I have one thought around this. I feel as educators, we are shaping the future of the world by our actions. So the question is not to feel like we are warriors, not to end up saying, okay, we'll endure it, but to demand more. And as education leaders, someone who's leading the school and leading all the efforts within the school, to demand more from the system, and for the system to be giving more, in the sense like policymakers, to ensure that there are basic minimum support that's being offered to educators, at least if not more than that of a pilot. So at least as much as a pilot. They're just flying a flight. You're flying nations through the kind of work that all of you do. So I think demanding more is one of them. The second thing that I do feel is um, this is one thing that I feel discussing with educators sometimes, not to also engage in too much of toxic positivity. So in fact, reaching out for mental well-being support when you need it, not to feel that like, this is a taboo. So the best thing that you can do for your kids is to take care of yourself. So I keep telling, if any organization that's working in education with teachers is a child rights organization, because at the end of the day, they're ensuring child rights through educators, because only when educators do well, do kids do well. So thank you so much for what you do. Now we will formally conclude this panel discussion, but I have a little bit of information for you. For those of you who recommended topics for the upcoming forum, we highly appreciate your efforts and your engagement. We are delighted to share with you that we have lined up a few sessions for the next few months based on your feedback. The next session for this forum would be on 9th of July. We have a meet and greet with education leaders and stakeholders from around the world through the Ed Leaders Meetup session, which is on 9th of July. And as far as this session is concerned, I believe that creating an educational environment that is intentional, inclusive, empathetic, compassionate, mindful, and one that values mental well-being and mental health of all stakeholders is crucial for the growth, development, and success of educators, learners, and our societies. So it is the responsibility of every individual, every leader in the education sector to shape or contribute to shaping policies and practices that foster such an ecosystem. With educators, school leaders, and learners all working together, we have the power and potential to affect positive transformation in the field of education. Like our panelists today, they shared, no one person or organization can solve the challenges. We need collective leadership. Thank you so much for sharing that one, Radha. So echoing that and concluding, I'm sure you may have many questions that may not have been covered or answered sufficiently in this discussion. We hope that the next few sessions that you have over the next few days, we'll be able to cover some of these. If you still have some concerns, please reach out to us with your thoughts, ideas, suggestions, and feedback. They're very valuable to us by either emailing us or tagging us on your social media posts. So on behalf of the Global Citizenship Foundation, the Council for Global Citizenship Education, and all our attendees, I extend our deepest gratitude to our panelists, Gloria, Pooja, and Radha, for taking the time out of their busy schedules and enriching this discourse through their unique ideas, insights, and experiences. Also, thank you for being part of the Educational Leadership Forum and for everything you've been doing to advance the discourse on transforming education for human and planetary flourishing. We really appreciate your time and your effort that you all bring to contribute to drive this extremely crucial discussion towards shaping the many futures of education for generations of young people. See you soon. Until then, take care, stay safe, and spread love and compassion. Our world needs it more.